You know that feeling of playing Gambler's Table and realizing you're not progressing the way you wanted? Or worse, finding out 3 hours later that there's a crucial mechanic the game just doesn't tell you? Yeah, it happened to me too. And look, I love it when indie games trust the player's intelligence, but there's a difference between being minimalist and hiding information that literally changes your entire performance. So today, I'm going to show you 7 essential tips that will stop you from playing in the dark and help you truly master this game. These are mechanics, shortcuts, and strategies that make an absurd difference, but aren't explained anywhere. I'm Mary, and the video is about to start. This mass flip tip in Gambler's Table seems silly until you feel in practice how much it changes the start of a run. Many people click coin by coin, almost on autopilot, which makes the beginning slower than it needs to be, exactly the part where you want to gain momentum without depending on luck or early upgrades. The secret is the cursor's gravity. When you click on a coin, the game pulls nearby coins into the same flip. So, instead of aiming perfectly at a specific coin, I do the opposite. I try to aim for the center of a cluster, as if I were clicking the space between them to catch as many as possible in one click. In practice, the most consistent way is to wait for a small group to gather, instead of clicking as soon as an isolated coin appears, and position the mouse at the most central point of that group. You'll feel that some coins that weren't exactly under the cursor get flipped anyway, and this drastically speeds up your initial earnings without spending a dime. It's literally free efficiency. The best part of this technique is that it creates a snowball effect. More flips per click equals more early gains equals more upgrade options before the run gets tight. I use this as my warm-up in every match because once you get the timing and positioning down, it's hard to go back to clicking them one by one. Gambler's Table is a game that pushes you toward the most obvious path, filling the table with cheap copper and feeling like you're progressing just because more things are spinning. However, after a while, you realize you're working too hard, clicking, organizing, managing space for a return that doesn't keep up. The trick is to treat the table as a limited resource, almost like an inventory in an old-school game. Every slot needs to pay for itself. Instead of spreading dozens of weak coins, it makes much more sense to invest early to reach better coins, like silver and gold, because they scale in a way that copper simply can't match. It feels like you're trading noise and motion for consistency and power. I like to think of it this way. Quantity gives you a quick spike, but quality gives you a machine that never stops printing value. With better coins, every flip carries more weight, and you need fewer pieces to feel growth, which also keeps the table organized with less visual clutter and micromanagement. The game doesn't make this clear, so many people take a long time to understand why they've plateaued. When I started prioritizing upgrades to raise the coin tier as soon as possible, my runs became more stable, and I stopped feeling like I was fighting against space all the time. In the end, it's one of those cases where fewer coins on the table can mean more money coming in, and that's when the game truly starts to flow. I'll admit that the first time I saw the sacrifice button in Gambler's Table, I felt that classic roguelike temptation. Should I reset now to start stronger? But then you do it too early and realize you threw away a setup that was still growing, and the restart becomes a step backwards disguised as progress. It's frustrating because the game doesn't warn you about the right timing. The reality is that sacrificing only makes sense when you feel the run has truly stalled, when upgrades become too expensive, or when you've unlocked platinum or diamond coins and the money is still trickling in slowly. Before that point, you're cutting off your momentum at its peak, like quitting a race in the middle of the start. The machine was still accelerating, and you turned it off to start from scratch. It makes no sense. The magic number I've learned to use as a reference is 270K or more before even thinking about sacrificing. With that amount, you can convert it into a decent number of skill points that actually make a difference in the next run. If you sacrifice with less, like 50K or 100K, you'll gain so little you'll barely feel the impact. And then you've wasted time rebuilding everything for an almost invisible improvement. When I started having patience and waiting for the setup to truly exhaust itself before hitting the button, the runs became much more productive. You feel that each sacrifice is a real leap, not just a resetting because I'm bored. It's almost like saving your ultimate for the right moment. There's no point in using it early if you're still in the warm-up phase of the match. This oxidation mechanic is probably the best kept secret in Gambler's Table, and I was blown away when I discovered it. Mostly because the game says absolutely nothing about it in the tutorial. You see the copper coins changing color after a while on the table and think, oh, it's just visual. But no, there's a massive hidden multiplier there, waiting for you to realize that letting things sit still is sometimes worth more than clicking like crazy. The scheme is simple, but requires patience. You leave the copper coins quiet on the table for about 90 seconds until they turn green and oxidized. When you finally flip a coin in this state, the return explodes. The difference is absurd compared to flipping it fresh. The problem is that it goes against every instinct in the game because you get that itch of, I need to click, I need to produce, and you end up flipping too early. I started treating this as a passive strategy. I set aside a corner of the table specifically for copper coins that I'm going to let cure like a long-term investment. While they oxidize, I focus on flipping the other coins normally to keep the cash flow moving. When it's finally time to collect the oxidized ones, it's almost like opening a secret chest. You feel like you found a shortcut the game intentionally hid. The craziest part is realizing that this mechanic turns copper, which everyone abandons after a while, into something relevant even in the mid-game. Instead of being early game trash, it becomes a strategic tool if you know how to use it. Just don't forget to keep track of time, because if you lose track of which coins are ready, it turns into a mess, and then you lose the whole advantage. When you open the Gambler's Table skill tree the first time, there are a million glowing paths and flashy names like Angel and A Flame that sound powerful just by the name. I fell into this trap. I invested in the perks that looked cooler visually without understanding what actually makes a difference in the game's scaling. The problem is that the game doesn't guide you. It throws the tree in your face and lets you figure out on your own which paths are a dead end. The right move, at least in the beginning, is to go straight for the perks that amplify coin bonuses, like Copper Surge or General Coin Value Multipliers. These upgrades scale exponentially. Every point invested there multiplies everything you already have, creating that snowball effect that gets your runs off the ground much faster. It's like choosing between increasing your base damage or picking a pretty visual effect. One accelerates your progression, the other just looks good on screen. Perks like Angel and A Flame have visual appeal and seem impactful, but they shine more in the late game when you already have a solid foundation to work with. If you invest in them early, you end up spending precious skill points on something that won't help you get through the slow early phase. It's frustrating because you feel like you've evolved, but in practice, your production remains sluggish, leaving you wondering why you aren't feeling the impact. Once I reoriented my investments to focus on coin multipliers right away, the difference was night and day. Runs started accelerating much earlier, I reached better coins with less effort, and only then could I think about picking up the more exotic perks. In the end, it's about understanding that foundation comes before style, and the game definitely doesn't make that clear to beginners. It took me way too long to discover that Gambler's Table has an auto flip hidden in the accessibility settings, and when I found it, I was actually a bit annoyed because nobody tells you about it. Not the tutorial, not the main interface. You spend your time clicking manually like a robot, thinking that's just how the game works, until you stumble upon this option buried in the menu. Then you activate it and think, why didn't I do this from the start? Autoflip gives you +1 click per second passively, which sounds like little on paper, but it completely changes the game dynamic. Suddenly, you don't have to babysit the screen all the time. You can let the game run while you do something else. Come back after half an hour and see that progression continued on its own. It's almost like unlocking the idle mode the game should have always had, but decided to hide. I started using this mainly for overnight progression. I leave the game open before going to bed, wake up, and already have money accumulated with zero effort. It works great combined with passive upgrades and high-tier coins because the autoflip works on top of values that are already worth it. It's like putting the game on autopilot while you live your life. The funniest part is that this option is under accessibility, as if it were only for those who have difficulty clicking. But in reality, everyone should activate it from the very first run. It transforms the game from something that requires constant attention into something you can let breathe on its own. And that makes all the difference for those who don't or can't stay glued to the screen all the time. The achievements in Gambler's Table are a bit tricky because the game doesn't prepare you for how they might conflict with your normal strategy. For example, there's the Lone Wolf achievement that asks you to earn $1 billion without using helpers. And if you don't know this beforehand, you'll spend skill points and money on helpers thinking you're optimizing, only to find out later that you've locked yourself out of the achievement. It's frustrating because the game doesn't warn you that certain choices block you from certain goals. For Lone Wolf specifically, the move is to completely ignore the helper tree and dump everything into cursor upgrades, click speed, multipliers, and efficiency per click. You basically become a clicking machine, and the game reverts to a pure active mode without automation, which is a bit tedious, but it's the way. The upside is that when you finally hit $1 billion, the sense of achievement is real because you did it through brute force. Now, when you're not hunting that achievement, that's when it's worth investing heavily in helpers combined with advanced tables. The poker table, for instance, is insane because it lets you retain 10% of your money when you sacrifice. This means your resets become much less painful and you can scale faster between runs. Combining efficient helpers with this retention loop creates a progression loop that massively accelerates the late game. The problem is that the game never explains this balance, when to focus on pure cursor, when to invest in helpers, or when to switch tables to optimize sacrifices. You end up learning this the hard way, testing builds and discovering you reset at the wrong time or invested in a path that didn't match your goal. My tip is define your goal before starting the run. If it's a specific achievement, look up the requirements. If it's pure progression, go all in on the synergy of helpers plus advanced tables.